Alright, so this video actually stems from a conversation I had the other night on the We Like Shooting podcast. I was actually a guest on the We Like Shooting podcast last Monday night. It is one of my favorite it actually is my favorite gun and shooting podcast. And I was actually a guest on that show. We had a long conversation about long-range precision shooting. And if you guys are interested in listening to that show, I'll leave a link down in the description below. It was episode 374. Or if you guys are just interested in a really good shooting and gun podcast that has lots of different guests through lots of different fields in the shooting industry, check out We Like Shooting podcast. They do have an awesome podcast. So part of the conversation we were having around long-range precision shooting was about the 224 Valkyrie and the 6mm ARC. So you guys know, if you guys have been following me for any amount of time, you know that when 224 Valkyrie first came out, I was kind of a big fan of the cartridge, and I still do really enjoy the cartridge, but I have over time started to realize some of the shortcomings of the 224 Valkyrie, which we'll talk more about in this video. It is still a great cartridge, but there are some issues that do arise when you try to put a heavy 690 88 grain big heavy bullet with a high BC into such a small cartridge and then fit it into such a small platform, which is what the 224 Valkyrie was designed to do, and it does it as well as can be done. So both of these obviously are fairly new cartridges. The 224 Valkyrie came out just a couple of years ago, and the 6 ARC was just recently introduced at the time of recording this video. The 224 Valkyrie was designed to be able to take big heavy super high BC 224 caliber bullets and be able to push them out of a regular AR size platform at speeds high enough to carry supersonic speeds out to some really far extended distances, and it does that well to a certain point. So the 6mm ARC was introduced, I do believe, the story that I have heard, and I don't know, somebody may correct me on this, the story I have heard about the 6mm ARC is the military wanted a cartridge that they could fit into a standard AR platform that would carry flatter trajectories than a 308 out to distance and still pack the same types of energy when it got out to those distances as a 308 and not have to do it in a platform like an AR-10. So both of these are, like I said, fairly new cartridges. Both of them have a different purpose to fit into a standard AR platform. So the origins of the 6 ARC brass, just like we talked about in the 6 ARC versus 6.5 Grendel comparison video, the origins of the 6 ARC brass are from 7.62 by 39 down to 220 Russian to 6.5 Grendel and then to 6mm ARC. The origins of the 224 Valkyrie brass are from 30 Remington down to 6.8 SPC down to 224 Valkyrie. The case capacity, this is something that's very interesting and something I really didn't realize until I got doing this video and doing some research on it. The case capacity of these is almost identical. Now, obviously the 6 ARC brass is a short little fat case, and the 224 Valkyrie is a longer case that is more narrow. So even though they're shaped very differently, they have almost identical case capacities. So the 6mm ARCs, when we talk about case capacities, like I've said in the past, we are talking about water case capacity. So if you were to fill one of these cases up with water and then weigh that water, that's what we're talking about in case capacity. So the 6mm ARC has a 34.0 grains of water case capacity, whereas the 224 Valkyrie has a 34.5 grains of water case capacity. So just slightly more, a half a grain more worth of case capacity in the 224 Valkyrie over the 6 ARC. The shoulder angle, both of these have a 30-degree shoulder angle, whereas the 6 ARC coming from the 6.5 Grendel that also has a 30-degree shoulder angle maintains that same 30-degree shoulder angle, whereas the 224 Valkyrie coming from the 6.8 SPC, with 6.8 SPC only having a 23-degree shoulder angle, so that shoulder angle is bumped up and given a much sharper shoulder angle to go into the 224 Valkyrie. The velocities, now when we were talking about velocities, I found good data online for both these cartridges. We're going to use Hornady's published data for both of these cartridges, and honestly CFE 223, which is a great powder for both these cartridges, is not the powder that I use, especially for the 224 Valkyrie, and it's not the powder that I plan to use for the 6 ARC. Now, obviously, it can be used. A lot of people are using this on the CFE 223, but for me, if you guys know one of my stipulations in a load that I develop, I try to develop a load with powder that is not temperature sensitive or not extremely temperature sensitive, and CFE 223 is not one of those powders. It is a fairly temperature sensitive powder. Even though it can create very good velocities, I would actually sacrifice a little bit of velocity to be able to shoot in any condition and have the same trajectory. So knowing that, the data that I found was very comparable using CFE 223, so that's what we're going with. So the 6mm arc with now, and this is all in a 24-inch gas gun, so that's exactly what we have here. My 224 Valkyrie is a 24-inch gas gun. So this data was created. I ran a generic load for both these around a 24-inch gas gun. So and also note that this is gas gun loads, so the pressures that we're working up for a gas gun load are much lower than we would if this was a bolt gun load. So if you're getting faster speeds and higher pressures out of your particular bolt gun in either 6 arc or 224 Valkyrie, that is totally fine, but that's not what we're looking at here, considering the purpose of both these cartridges was typically to be able to run in some sort of short miniature action or a regular AR size platform. So the 6mm arc with 29.1 grains of CFE 223 on a 108 grain ELD, you're looking at 2,740 feet per second. With the 224 Valkyrie with 26.0 grains of CFE 223, you're looking at 2,750 feet per second behind an 88 grain ELD. So in my 6mm arc versus 224 Grendel, or 6.5 Grendel comparison video that I did recently, there was quite a few comments in that particular video asking me why I didn't use the exact same weight bullet for both cartridges. Now, a lot of you will understand why I didn't, but for those of you who don't and might want to ask that same question in this video, if I was to use a 90 grain bullet for the 6 arc in that video, which is a fairly regular size bullet, a high enough BC in the 6mm category, and then I was to do a 90 grain bullet in the 6.5 category, yes, they would have a much closer muzzle velocity, but when that got out to further distances, the trajectory of a 90 grain 6.5 bullet with such a low ballistic coefficient would fall out of the sky much faster than the 123 grain bullet that we chose to use. So I'm trying to make these as even of a comparison as possible. And this is just for any of you who may be wondering why I'm not using the exact same size bullet for both these. So with these, we have actually been able to, with the 88 grain ELD and the 108 ELD, we're able to get a very close comparison between these two cartridges, even though they're not the same grain weight. So that's all I want to say about that. So trajectory. Trajectory with the 6mm arc, with that 24-inch gas gun, with our 29.1 grains of CFE 223 at 2,740 feet per second, with a 108 ELD, you're looking at now I want to say I have true data for both these bullets, so I'm using my true ballistic coefficients that I have come up with for both these bullets. I've been shooting both these bullets for quite some time. I have trued both these out to transonic, so I do have very good true data, at least for my particular rifles. So that's the ballistic coefficients we're using for these generic loads. So the 6mm arc at 500 yards at 2,740 feet per second with the 108 ELD with a ballistic coefficient, a true ballistic coefficient of 0.262 is what my true ballistic coefficient. We are looking at a 10.25 minute of angle drop at 500 yards, or 10.25 minute of angle elevation at 500 yards, with a 928 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. At 1,000 yards, we're looking at 32.75 minutes of angle elevation with 420.5 foot-pounds of energy. So the 224 Valkyrie, with my true ballistic coefficients behind the 88 grain ELD, which is a 0.262. Now, that is almost identical, or I'm sorry, 0.260. So that is almost identical to the ballistic coefficient of the 108 ELD. And you might be saying, well, how is that possible? If you look at the 88 grain ELD and how long that bullet is, it is almost the exact same length as the 108 ELD, even though this is in a much smaller diameter cartridge, or much smaller diameter bullet. So this is where some of the problems arise, in my personal opinion, with the 224 Valkyrie. When trying to push such a super high BC bullet with such a small charge, it has a hard time. Now they do stabilize, but it has a hard time staying consistent. So you can work up a load with the 224 Valkyrie with one of these super heavy for caliber bullets, and you'll tend to find that they will shoot great for about 100 rounds, 80 rounds, and then that load will completely fall apart, and you will have to go through and completely redo your load development. Whereas if you are not trying to push such a long, heavy bullet, a lot of guys have went down to the 80 grain category of bullets, and that's actually where I ended up. I ended up shooting the 80 grains and found that I was finding much more consistency, and my load didn't fall apart at any point. So that is one of the shortcomings, I think, that came about with the 224 Valkyrie, and I think a lot of people have realized that, and that is why you don't see as many people loading the 90s and the 88s and the 95s anymore, because of those issues trying to run such a big, heavy bullet in such a small diameter cartridge. So the 224 Valkyrie, with our 26.0 grain charge of CFE 223, with the 88 grain ELD, at 2,750 feet per second, so 10 feet per second faster, and a 0.002 less on our ballistic coefficient. At that 2,750 feet per second at 500 yards, you're looking at 10.25 minutes of angle of drop and 759 foot-pounds of energy. So the almost identical drop to the 6 arc. It is an identical elevation to the 6 arc at 500 yards, and a considerable amount less energy, and that is obvious because of the much smaller bullet. Even though it's traveling at the same speeds with the same ballistic coefficient, it is a smaller bullet. It packs a smaller punch. Out to 1,000 yards, you're looking at 32.5 minutes of angle, so a quarter-minute flatter trajectory out to 1,000 yards from the 224 Valkyrie, and 341 foot-pounds of energy, so 80 foot-pounds of energy less out to 1,000 yards. Now, I would imagine nobody's planning on taking any game or any large size game with a 224 Valkyrie or a 6 arc out to 1,000 yards, but these are the numbers that we come up with. So barrel life in both these cartridges, both these, typically any of these small cartridges that fit into a standard AR platform are going to have very good barrel life. So the 6 arc, just like we talked about in the last video, there is not a whole lot of data out there yet on burning out barrels for the 6 arc because it is such a new cartridge at the time of recording this video. So because of that, we don't have a lot of data on that, and we have to rely on very similar cartridges and the numbers that we come up with their barrel for their barrel life, which is with the 6 arc you're looking at about 3,000 to 3,500 feet per second. Or 3,500 rounds of barrel life. And that, when we talk about barrel life, we're not talking about how many rounds can I get out of a barrel before it's completely shot out. We're talking about match accuracy. So the highest accuracy you can get out of that particular barrel, you're looking at between 3,000 and 3,500 rounds for the 6 arc. Whereas the 224 Valkyrie, smaller bullet, less charge weight, you're looking at 4,500 to 5,000 rounds of match accuracy from the 224 Valkyrie. Now if you look on a lot of the forums, excuse me, there are numbers all over the place, different claims of barrel life for the 224 Valkyrie. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that JP, if you guys know anything about JP barrels and their ultra match barrels that are cryogenically treated and all that, those barrels typically get a longer barrel life. And JP has been a large adopter of the 224 Valkyrie, and because of that, I think a lot of people are assuming that the barrel life that you get out of those JP barrels, which they're claiming to get over 6,000 rounds and still be holding very tight groups, is the same barrel life you're going to get out of a standard 224 Valkyrie barrel, and that's just not the case. So I'm looking, from all my research and everything that everybody I've talked to, we're looking at 4,500 to 5,000 rounds of barrel life from the 224 Valkyrie, which is a significant amount more than the 6 arc. Recoil. These things almost have the exact same recoil. Now, obviously, you're pushing a slightly smaller bullet out of the 224 Valkyrie, so you're going to have slightly less recoil, but both have such minimal recoil that I would say it's almost not even noticeable. Even though the 6 ARC does have a slightly more stout recoil, both these cartridges would be great for a small child wanting to get into long-range precision shooting. Factory rifle availability, because the 6 ARC is very new. From what I'm aware of, there are not any factory bolt guns or anything like that available for the 6 ARC. Gas guns, there are a few factory gas guns available, like CMMG, which is something I forgot to mention in my last 6 ARC video. CMMG was the first to introduce full 6 ARC rifles, and there's Santan Arms. I think there's actually a couple other manufacturers that are doing 6 ARC rifles, but nowhere near as many as the 224 Valkyrie. Obviously, the 224 Valkyrie's been around for a couple of years now, and there's been a lot of different companies adopt the 224 Valkyrie cartridge. So you're looking at like Mossberg and Savage both have 224 Valkyrie bolt guns and gas guns. So, as well as most of the other manufacturers that you're going to find, the Bear Creek Arsenals, the Palmetto State Armories, all those have many different options in the 224 Valkyrie. So the 224, and as well as barrels of being available and all that, there's just so much more available for the 224 Valkyrie. And I think one of the big things that has hindered the 6mm ARC from having such a huge rush on people producing parts and barrels and things for the 6 ARC is the fact that this all happened at the same time as this whole pandemic mess. And because of that, if you guys follow along with the gun industry at all, you've seen all the panic buying and all the stuff going on. Manufacturers are having a hard enough time keeping their stocks of the things that they sell the most of replenished, without trying to get into new cartridges like the 6 ARC. So I do believe when all of this stuff is over, we will see a lot of 6 ARC stuff coming online and being available just like we have in the 224 Valkyrie. So factory ammo availability, just like with the rifles, 6 ARC being brand new with all the stuff going on, there's not a whole lot of people doing ammo for the 6 ARC. As a matter of fact, from what I am aware of, Hornady, who is the company that introduced the 6 ARC cartridge, is the only company doing 6 ARC ammo, factory ammo right now. So if you are looking to do factory ammo, you are going to have to go with Hornady, and it is going to be hard to find because of all the things going on and the shortage in ammo in general. The ammo availability of the 6 ARC is no exception. So the 224 Valkyrie. The 224 Valkyrie, because it has been around a lot longer, there was a lot of companies that jumped on it right off the bat. You're looking at Hornady, Federal, Sierra, and Underwood, and I think there are even a couple more that all do factory ammo for the 224 Valkyrie. Brass availability, just like obviously if Hornady is the only one doing factory ammo, Hornady is the only brass available for the 6 ARC. And it is somewhat hard to find, and if you are looking to find 6 ARC brass and having a hard time, you can easily neck down 6.5 Grendel brass. And if you're wondering how to do that, check out Eagle Eye Shooting's channel. He has a great video on necking down 6 ARC brass from 224 or from 6.5 Grendel. 224 Valkyrie, obviously it's been around a while, so you're looking at Hornady, Federal, and Starline all doing 224 Valkyrie brass, and there may be some others, but those are the ones that I am personally aware of. As well as components are going to be a little bit cheaper for the 224 Valkyrie. Obviously you're running a smaller bullet. It takes less material to make a bullet in a 224 diameter than it does in a 243 diameter, so you are going to have, it's going to cost you a little less for components like bullets for the 224 Valkyrie. So this has been the full breakdown of the 6 ARC and the 224 Valkyrie. I hope this was helpful. If you guys are looking at either of these cartridges, maybe this helps you make your choice. So I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.